Hello, darlings. Welcome to Love, Truth, and Beauty. This is episode 349, and this is my sixth installment of my Conversations with Women series. And I have with me one of my bestest girls on the whole freaking planet, who goes by the handle of Kaya Marie. She is one of my teachers, my mentors. She's a student. She's a chica of truth, and I can always rely on her to give it to me fucking straight up and not filter and not bullshit and not try to glamorize anything. Welcome, Kaya. Hi, sweetheart.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That's so nice.
Oh, honey, I have been looking forward to this. So let's just go to it. Because we're talking about doing the actual shadow work, doing the actual great work of unwinding what I call the malignant mother. And not to get down on any of our mothers, but unless our parents, and I say this again and again and again, conceive us from an awakened state outside of the matrix in the true quantum field, creation field universe, we're pretty much fucked. And we have to do the shadow work, the great work. So you and I have had many, many very, very frank, unfiltered conversations about this process. So I want to just hear it from you straight up, because our viewers really they're hungry, they're starving, they're thirsty for the real deal. None of this new age, oh, it's just all love and light, and I just transcend it. Well, we don't do any of that shit, okay? We're on our hands and knees, we're groveling through the charnel grounds, as the Tibetan Buddhists would say.
Right, yeah. So my story is kind of starts with kind of the nitty gritty of that, which is basically being born into really intense intergenerational trauma, passed down through both parents, really. But my father being kind of like this narcissistic central figure in the family, and my mom sort of just kind of repeating the patterns that were passed down to her. So attracting the men that had the same behaviors as her own father. Actually a little better than her own father, because her own father was much, much, much worse, I think, from the stories I've heard, than my father. So it does seem like it gets a little better each generation, even if you do nothing.
Yes.
But I was sort of always the outsider, I felt like, in my family. I was kind of like the old soul and like the good kid, but that's mostly because I was constantly using my empathy to track everyone's moods, and especially my father, so that I could basically stay out of danger, stay out of trouble. There was a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of addiction, a lot of just turmoil, unpredictability. And, like I said, part of that good kid, old soul vibe was using that empathy, which I found that my childhood was almost like a really intense training ground for certain skill sets.
Yes.
Which I think happens to a lot of abused children. They develop that kind of sixth sense that later on, if you can work through the trauma, it actually becomes a gift. It becomes something you can use in other ways, basically.
Right. Rather than a trap.
Right, rather than a trap, yeah. Although there's a lot of booby traps.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What are some of the booby traps that you were aware of? I mean, in hindsight, or even as a child, that you noticed?
Right. Well, I mean, I think as you get older, if you don't learn to harness that gift, it can kind of eat you up, because, and I'm still working through this in some ways, but that constant caretaking of others and sort of always trying to manage other people's emotions, always being hypersensitive to what other people are feeling, versus what you're feeling. And there was a certain point in my path when I really made that connection, like, oh, this isn't my feeling. This is this person standing next to me feeling.
Wow.
This. And realizing that my whole childhood, I hadn't really made the separation. I wasn't allowed to have my own feelings really that often. So
How
Yeah.
old were you when you had that realization?
The one about like my own feelings versus other people's feelings, that came quite late, honestly. It was after my pretty long, not too long after my first major awakening, but I was early 20s, I think, when I really started noticing that. Yeah. And then I would play with it and I would ask the person, so are you mad right now? And they would be like, no. And then I'm thinking of one specific example with a girlfriend, and then she'd look within and go, wait a minute, I was kind of irritable about this thing, but I wasn't really aware of it yet.
Yeah. 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 Well, there's no precedence for that. As
Right.
kids, we're just absorbing and observing, and then
Right.
doing all the little incremental tweaks to make sure we're not going to get hit, or we're not going to get yelled at, or we're not
Yeah.
going to, we're not going to be neglected or whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I basically became the person through programming, through that emotional, energetic, mental programming, that would stay out of danger with my father. So that's the whole journey, is like learning how to unravel that programming, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were some of the themes that were, say, triggers for him?
Oh, wow, good question. Everything. If you get home from work.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the home from work, and all of a sudden,
yes,
like, oh shit.
I remember being able to hear his truck from down the block. Like, my nervous system was tuned to the sound of his vehicle, whatever vehicle was at the time, motorcycle, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if we still had our school clothes on, because we were supposed to take our school clothes off the minute we got home so they didn't get dirty, which is logical. Things like that, just little things. Sometimes it was just something nobody really understood, and all of a sudden he's blowing up about something, so I could track it a lot of the time, and then other times it was just sort of this subtle perception, like, oh, he's getting in that mood, right? I can feel it. So
wow.
But yeah, a lot of it was just really little things. And granted, I think my dad he's in the military. He was working like multiple jobs to try to support us and stuff sometimes. So there was a lot of stress, and he was passing down what was passed down to him.
Yeah.
Basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Was there a sort of, like, you were talking about being tuned in to like his moods and his modes? I know that with my mother, there was a certain metallic taste in the air.
Oh, wow.
Where it was almost like it was a precursor to shit hitting the fan for no reason,
Right.
other than whatever. I don't know if it was biochemical, that she was like a stress hormone that was being emitted into the air.
Yeah.
Did your dad have something like that, or like a vibe?
I just remember basically the feeling, and it was almost like, for me, it became almost a subconscious mechanism too. I wasn't even necessarily that aware that I was, because when you're a kid, you're so identified with everything. You don't have enough spaciousness to like, now I'm observing you did, obviously, it sounds like, or at least later, with the metallic thing. But yeah, I don't remember anything specific like that. It was just like an overall sense, feeling.
Yeah. And did you notice your mom having the same response as you?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question too.
Because the two tend to dance. Like my father was never in the picture, so I'm curious as to the kind of dance that you saw between them,
right,
as you were managing the energy.
Right. Well, it started so early that I'm sure I learned and mimicked a lot of behaviors from my mom, as far as going into people pleasing mode.
Okay.
And just trying to stay out of his way, kind of. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of that, I think, was just really deeply ingrained. Even by the time I was 10 years old, it was so deeply programmed in. So I don't remember. That's a good question. That's like something to ponder, right? Like
yeah. I'm curious.
do remember my mom behaving very much like a child with men, like not being fully in her womanhood, her power.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Which I always had a lot of disrespect for. And I kind of learned to like, I actually, this is an interesting theme that I wasn't planning on talking about, but I actually kind of learned to hate the feminine in myself because I misunderstood what it was. And so later in my journey, you know, again, in my early 20s, shortly after my big major awakening, I had to really consciously open up to not only the inner feminine, but women in general, because I had this really intense disrespect.
Yeah, me as well.
Really?
I
Yeah.
didn't want to be like them.
Yeah.
There was something off about it. And I think that's why you and I, we get along so we understand each other, is because that malignant feminine who misuses her beauty, misuses her sexuality, plays dumb, does not protect her children, or blames her children, and especially the boys, and disrespects her girls. I always thought, like, what the fuck is going on here? And then, you know, the journey that we have to do to sort of do the maths, and, you know, we both have huge Capricorn influence, and being able to like match it up, it's like, okay, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Like my inner feminine was definitely just deeply buried and wounded. Yeah. Yeah, so that's been a journey.
What were some of the themes of the disrespect for you that you were aware of or became aware of? And did you find them within yourself?
Well, what I found in myself is that I learned to embody the masculine and avoid embodying the feminine, and up until a certain point. And I was unconscious of it, but and the theme was that I thought the feminine was disempowered and weak, basically. I just thought, you know, the model that my mom gave me was that being feminine, because my mom is truly feminine in some ways. She does embody, she's a nurturer, she's a child bearer, you know, she's very much that feminine path, biological feminine path. And that's all she ever wanted. That's all my mom ever wanted, was to have kids, raise kids, be in the home, right? But she had this pattern of just attracting over and over again, like the lowest form of male that sort of mimicked her patterns with her dad, right? So the theme of my idea with the feminine was that it was weak, basically. And a pushover. And powerless. And just I didn't understand true feminine power, which is a whole other, you know, harnessing.
Interesting. Because I had, you know, my mom had a PhD and she was very much out in the world. So she had masculinized a lot of her femininity. But her femininity was not warm, was not nurturing, was more sort of underhanded, more lunar. Lunar in a negative way.
Like, you know, manipulative and vindictive.
And I think for you, it feels like you embodied actually the good masculine, where you set out to be out in the world on your own terms. And I think as feminine essences, I mean, you and I are both very, very feminine in our appearance and just the way we are, but we are also masculinized in a good sense, where we're able to take care of business out in the world, where men and women need to have that, where our masculine is able to project out in the world and take care of things. And I think this is where a lot of our troubles are now with both men and women, where a lot of men and women out in the world, they're fucking whiny tits. You know, they don't want to sit there. They don't want to take responsibility. They want government programs to take care of it, or are sort of relegating their own personal power to like an authority, kind of like what your mom did in a way, abdicating her authority say your father, or to whatever, and infantilizing herself, you know.
Right.
Whereas I think
Exactly.
when we express out in the world in a way that's active, like you were saying, I think what that does is that it really allows us to take the reins so that we aren't infantilized, so that we're not sort of pushovers. But the caveat to not being a pushover is that a lot of times we are sort of these covert doormats. I know I was for a while, where you just let things fly because of the empathy, because of the compassion, because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
kind of putting blinders on, you know,
Yeah.
and just doing. I think that's part of the sort of the edge of being in the masculine too much as women, is that we can have tunnel vision and just be in that doing mode.
Right.
And then, you know, shit hits the fan because we hit a brick wall.
Right. Yeah, having that balance is really important. And I think moving forward, that's such a huge collective theme, right? Is to cultivate both within yourself and kind of know when to embody which one, you know. And hopefully we have relationships where there is some inner outer balance too. Like, okay, my man fills in a little bit more of this like masculine shit in the world that exhausts me, you know, and I can kind of be creative bubble self.
I love it.
Yeah.
And we're both in relationships where we get to experience that more.
Yeah. So you want me to kind of just continue, or you want
Yes. I'm curious about you know, the sort of realization in your 20s about, you know, just this awareness of
with the masculine feminine particularly, or with like
with that, and also just in terms of what you were noticing in your relationships, not just with men but friendships especially, because those arenas, they're tricky. They've been really tricky for me, and especially with women, it's been tricky.
It's been really tricky for me with women. I hate to be one of those girls that's like, oh, I get along with guys better, you know.
I get along with guys better as well.
That's been a theme for me.
But guys are more straightforward.
Right. And I can
you know where you stand with them, where women are, they're very underhanded, very covert, very lunar rather than solar.
Right.
There's all kinds of like fucking tricky shit going on in their heads.
Right. Yeah. So that's been a theme for me too. The kind of backhanded compliments, I guess they are, and intense jealousy. And you know, right away when I entered school, not right away, once I hit puberty, basically 14, 15, I really started having problems with girls, and I didn't understand what it was at the time, but looking back, it's like, you know, I can kind of see what was going on. But that kind of added to that trauma around the feminine too. So by the time I got to that point in my 20s, when I was starting to wake up to where I was disconnected on that level, I did notice that it was very difficult for me to connect with women. Even to this day, I feel sort of uncomfortable in groups of women. I have to say, if it's a group of women, just women, there's a little bit of like,
I don't like it. I don't don't want to be in the hen house. You know, I don't. It's a shit show. It's a total shit show. And I don't relate.
Yeah, I often don't relate, but I mean, you and I relate really well. Yes. We're both women. So yeah. I had some really key soul allies through the feminine, but yeah, there's been a lot of that. And that's what I noticed, you know, in my 20s, early 20s, was that disconnect. And yeah, like I said, even now I'm still kind of working through that a little bit. Maybe some of it is just like, well, that's just the way it is. Like, maybe.
Well, I think that's just the way it is with women who have not done the shadow work to like really get beyond their own sort of program filters about how
Right.
women are supposed to be and not supposed to be. And I think
Right.
like part of my my process of, you know, having been a survivor of, say, second wave feminism, you know, and then having to be in a society where I've gotten slapped by third and fourth wave feminists. And
Right.
those third and fourth wave feminists, I mean, they are just immersed in new age bullshit land, the tantra land, the goddess entrepreneurial, you know, sex kitten groups and shit. And my years in Burning Man, it's like, oh my God, shoot me now. I mean,
Right.
I dumped a bunch of photos recently of just what I was up to, and I'm going, holy shit. If anybody has any copies of that shit, I have a lot to answer for. You know, I'm walking around in fucking booty shorts and shit, you know, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what is that? What is that?
Right.
And I was leading ceremonies and crap. Like, I don't even, and I think back to that, and I had gotten sucked into that whole sexy goddess sex kitten kind of thing, and realizing I'm abusing my sexuality, I am abusing my beauty, I'm being a manipulative little biatch from hell, and then I'm getting mad at men for going there.
Right.
And that's what I've noticed is the theme with a lot of the goddess entrepreneurial, new agey, fake tantra, you know, crap. It's like, oh my God. And for me, I'm repulsed. I'm just absolutely repulsed, because that is a big, huge theme in feminism, that I can do what I want. If I want to wear booty shorts and I want my boobs out and a guy's looking at me, he's the fucking problem. It's like, no, that's not true. That really isn't
Right.
true. Especially
Right.
in the Matrix, when our five senses are totally hijacked by imagery, by pornography, when you have, you know, the satanic cabal ball weaponizing sexuality and beauty, you know, where
Right.
people are making massive amounts of money profiting off of this. I mean, it really is. It's chaos black magic, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. There's a lot of inverted sort of stuff going on with the feminist, at least the modern feminist movement. That
Yes.
whole waking up from that, you know, sexual revolution or whatever they're calling it, for me was a pretty rude awakening, I must say.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
I want to hear it.
Yeah, I don't know how deep I want to go into that, but I mean, I also went down the road of, I look back at photos. In fact, I made a post recently when that drama went on my Facebook or whatever. I don't know if you noticed that post, but I was talking about just that, like looking back at dancing around in these really skimpy outfits. And I mean, I walked around town in, you know, booty shorts up my butt crack, fishnets, like anybody here where I live now would be like, that's a hooker. You know what I mean? They don't have
exactly.
But in that culture, when you're deep in that liberal feminist culture, that can become very normal.
Yes, it's totally normalized.
It's very
Completely normalized.
Yeah. And I remember feeling like I wasn't sexualizing myself. Like it was like, no, this is just my body.
This is just me.
I'm a dancer. I love to go out. I get sweaty and dance and, you know, whatever. But when I started to wake up to that, well, two things happened. First is that I started noticing my own trauma playing out. You know, I started to notice first, I'm really dissatisfied with the caliber of sort of men that I'm interacting with. Exactly. And the way those relationships are playing out, or lack there. I mean, they weren't really relationships at that point. It was basically just like trauma bonding through sex is feels like.
Right.
And So I started to become aware of that in my own nervous system. Like, wow, I'm really hurting myself here. This is like a self-betrayal. This doesn't feel good. The other thing I started noticing is that in the town I was in, there were like literal witch hunts going on for I mean, not literal, but
yeah, no, I get it.
for men, which were mutual friends of mine. And this didn't just happen once. This was like a pattern I saw forming where these bands of women would get together and start accusing a guy of, you know, the R word. And you look into it and like start to what really happened there, you know? Like there's, you know, starting to take that word and then expand the definition.
Yes.
You know, to like anything and everything, including like regret after the fact or something.
Yes.
So I started seeing all that, and I actually was pulled into a couple of those dramas, like women, because I was like pretty deep in the community and I had a lot of women friends. This is probably another moment where I noticed, you know, I don't really vibe with a lot of women. But I was pulled into a couple of those dramas, and one of them was really stupid. It was like an online drama. And all I said was, they pulled me in and they were like just railing on this guy. And there was like a lot of red flags with this guy. I don't know what really happened, but I agreed with them. I was like, okay, you're probably right. Like he's out of integrity in his behavior, right? And I said, and wouldn't it be great if we could get together and we could, in ourselves, understand what those red flags are so that we cannot repeat this pattern and then be accountable for our own experience.
Right.
And I said it, which I thought it was really tactful, and I wasn't
good for you. I was doing the same thing.
They went batshit.
Oh.
They went crazy. They were trying to pull in all these other people into and this is like an online drama again.
Right.
But I ended up having to block these women because I was just like, wow, this is
it's that crowd consciousness, that mob.
Yeah.
Where it becomes a totalitarian shit show. You either one of us, you think like we do, you feel what we do, you say what we do what we say, and you've got to be in agreement or fuck you.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of like the tipping point when I started to go, oh, okay, feminism isn't what I thought it was. And then through that, in combination with just looking into my own trauma and my behavior, it just unraveled. And I just noticed how the ideologies of feminism and sex positivity and all that were attached to my trauma. And then I thought, is that intentional? Like that was the next logical step. Like, is this
totally by design?
Yeah. So that's that whole, you know, trauma-based mind control. That's like the epitome of trauma-based mind control. Right
well, and we don't, people talk about the patriarchy. We don't have a patriarchy. We don't have a matriarch. We have a gynocracy. And when people start going down the rabbit holes of how this country was founded, the background of masonry, the Masons themselves, if you notice the symbology, it's a goddess cult. It is a goddess cult. It's fronted by men, but in the background, pulling the strings, are these elitist women who are weaponizing not just our trauma, rewriting history, okay, and working with pop culture and all the celebrity stupids, right, to evoke all this imagery, to evoke and invoke atavistic triggers, the atavism that is our psychic DNA of all of the traumas of human history, throughout human history, but they are non-specific. So we don't even know what the narratives are, other than we see an image and we're gonna fuck it. We're gonna fucking fuck up all the men, especially the white men, okay, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And so those of us women who are really connected with our core, you start to realize, wait a minute, I am not part of your bitch club, man. I'm not. No, this is wrong. This is wrong. Wow, what an intense experience.
Yeah, it's so interesting to try to surf those edges because, you know, you go a little bit far this way and you're in that freaking feminist cult. You go a little bit far this way and you're in the, you know, I don't know why I'm saying the R word, but you're like, oh, whatever, it's okay. It's like, no, I'm not at any extreme.
I'm not in any of your clubs, y'all.
Right, no clubs.
The
no
truth.
clubs, no bodies.
The truth doesn't give a shit about your feelings. It's like, you know, I love that Trump hat from 2020, fuck your feelings. That's my favorite hat. I mean, I didn't go there, but it's my favorite hat. I just
saw a clip of him. I hope you've seen it. If you haven't, I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay, you have to send it to me. I mean,
it's funny because my
hilarious.
feelings about him have gone, you know, whatever. Sometimes I'm like, and other times, but you just cannot deny how funny and cutting.
It's hysterical. And these people in particular, they fucking lose their shit over him.
I know.
I just watch it. I'm like, I need popcorn with cheese. I mean, I'm just like, what the fuck, kids?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Just the entertainment value alone is worth it.
I love it. I love it so much. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah.
So wow, we just
how does it play out in relationships for you? Like, what was your theme in terms of the men that you found were attracted to you versus the men you're attracted to, or were they one and the same? Because I know that with trauma-based mind control, what we don't realize is that whatever's happening internally, mentally, physically, psychically, spiritually, whatever, is going to play out in the theater of the outer screen of the matrix.
Right.
And, I'm always fascinated. I'm like going, okay, let's see what happens.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so interesting when you get one of those sort of obvious moments too. Like, wow, okay, that's an exact reflection. What I got going on in here. Excuse me. I think it's evolved a lot over the years. One thing I did notice when I started waking up out of that sort of feminist, the trauma-based mind control of feminism, is that I was still embodying my masculine a lot more than my feminine. I was still sort of out of balance, even though anyone looking at me could go, oh, she's very feminine, you know? The way that, especially the way I was interacting in relationships. I was dominating. I was very, you know, I don't want to say I was controlling, but I definitely felt the need to lead and dominate. And so by the end of, you know, my sort of liberal echo chamber journey, I realized that I was like really dissatisfied. I was attracting kind of feminized men. And that's because I was embodying more that leading, dominating kind of energy. And that can be so subtle too. That can be really subtle. Just like the inability to just like kind of rest with the energies. Versus push something along or pursue. I would always pursue and be very assertive with men. So I think the way I've changed now, and I don't think I'm really like healed on this level. I mean, it's still kind of a shit show. What's going on?
It's an on and off shit show for me. Yes. But I think that's just part of evolution.
Right.
You know, is that there's an ebb and flow, and that's the sort of dance that we're doing with our relationships. Where, you know, you have this sort of consciousness that emerges and blossoms, and then an integration, and then what just happened?
So after I kind of came out of that little bit of a sleepwalking phase, I was much more attracted to like traditionally masculine men, which is, you know, Patrick, who I'm with now, is very much more traditionally masculine. One of the things I've noticed is that in that liberal sphere where the men are more feminine, they're also a lot more spiritually evolved, at least some of them. There's a lot more of that attunement to sort of the realms that you use the feminine to get into.
Yes.
That receptive place where, you know, you're using
Yeah.
your receptivity to kind of feel into the subtler
Yeah.
realms.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've noticed that too, or, you know, what's been...
I've noticed that, but I also know like my own patterns, where I was definitely attracted to more of, and this is my trauma speaking, more attracted to men who appeared to be worshipers of the goddess, right?
Right.
Only to feign that interest in order to get into my pants.
Oh, right.
So they were playing a role, you know, the yoni god, the goddess yoni worshiping soy boy type,
Remembering a
who,
meme.
you know, unfortunately didn't have a job, didn't, you know, wasn't taking care of his kids, was always crying victim that, oh yeah, the bitch took everything, that kind of shit, only to discover none of it was true. So, but I think a lot of that happened because, you know, not having a father around, I didn't know what the fuck a man was.
Right.
And the men in my extended family were all military people or people who were entrepreneurs who were gone a lot, so they didn't stay home.
Right.
So
right.
my image of men is like, you know, they're gone.
Right.
And so I've kind of adopted that as the wanderer. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how it's sort of played out. And just like yourself, I am much more attracted to men who are more traditional. And I realize my core values, I'm very conservative. I'm very traditional. And I think I was like really longing for that. And I just didn't even know what that was.
Right.
I didn't even know what that was.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, they sort of, it's, you know, my experience has been that it's that conservatives are like demonized, you know.
They're totally demonized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you know, racist, redneck, or whatever, you know,
Yeah, and they're not.
Are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But myself as well, when I started waking up to that kind of self-betrayal that I was doing.
Yeah.
And realizing that I actually wasn't really nourished by, especially in sort of like the free sex movement kind of part of it. I've had really solid relationships with, you know, quote unquote liberal men, who may have been more on the feminine side. And that was really satisfying on other levels than, you know, being caught in that stupid free sex movement. But yeah, once I started learning what the conservative values were, I was like, this feels more in alignment with nature to me.
Yes.
It feels more in alignment with like my natural rhythm.
Yes.
And what would be really nourishing for me. And that goes back to that feminist kind of, it's the collective trauma-based mind control, because that splitting up of the family, I mean, you said yourself, it's like when you don't have a father in the picture, that's a completely different experience.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And my mother was a man-hating psycho.
Right.
She was very disparaging and very disrespectful to men.
Right.
And it was shocking to me, just the shit that would come out of her mouth. And then of course, you know, with my brother, my younger brother, I mean, to watch him develop into this, you know, I mean, he is an uber leftist psycho.
Really?
And of course he's in politics. Of course he is, because that is what's required. You need to be a complete fucking nut job and feel entitled to reparations for shit that never happened to you. It's weird. It's like, what the fuck? Claiming
so you're
racist,
totally
this and
different
that.
People. Yeah.
I've never experienced racism, to be honest. I mean, I've had racial slurs thrown at me by fucking dipshits who don't matter and they're just ignorant. ignorant people. But for me, I've never experienced racism from white people, ever, 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 ever. I've experienced racism from Asian people.
Right.
I mean, and so for me, I'm just kind of like, yeah. I mean, the whole breakup of the family system.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's huge,
Yeah. It's huge.
And I've always been immersed in taking care of other people's kids and making sure that I create this cohesive family unit where, I'm accountable, I'm dependable, and, I'm creating this home life that I didn't have. That's been sort of one of my reasons for being, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Yeah. That can be really painful. I did the kind of stepmom thing for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I really got attached to that little girl.
It's so easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just don't have any rights. Once it's split, yeah. I mean, I wasn't really acknowledged, at that point. Not that 3 years is that big a deal in like a parent's whole journey, but
yeah.
It was for me. So
Aww.
Yeah.
Aww. I know. Well,
it was a long time ago.
You know my story with, the stepkids and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard. It's hard because, I think a little bit to this day, I really, I still feel that connection, and I still feel that sort of yearning for that family.
Right.
And I think that's part of my divine feminine essence. And she's in that place of, okay, didn't exactly happen for me the way I wanted it, and it is painful, and that's something that I navigate, on a very, very regular basis. And I don't know if I'll ever get over that kind of thing.
Right. Right. Just the grief of letting go of that family that you were part of, that you helped raise. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting too to think about just the journey as a woman, and for me personally, there's definitely like, and I don't know how much of this is really going to be true for me in the end, but there's been a lot of moments of sort of regret, because I just, from such a young age, I was just like, I'm never having kids. I'm never having kids. I'm never going to have kids. I'm always going to be an auntie, which I am now. I'm like this cool auntie, and it wasn't until very recently, about 5 years ago. Well, what happened was I actually met a man that I could envision having kids with, because there was so much stability.
Yes.
And especially financial stability, but also just stability of the home, and just, like I could rely on him.
Yeah.
So I had felt really deep love in other relationships that was undeniable, and soul connection, but I didn't feel that kind of stability.
Yeah.
And as soon as I started feeling that, I thought, wow, maybe I could be a mother, maybe there is because I always said if I was ever going to have kids, I wasn't going to do to my kids what my parents did to me.
Of course. And that's a natural evolution. And for us women, as we're growing up, that, what's it called? It's called matrophobia, where it's that fear of being like your mother.
Right.
And just, no, I'm not going to be like you. I have that. And I was very clear. The buck stops with me, because if I do, I was afraid I was going to be an abusing mama, know.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was barred, or I just had abortions, shamefully. Right. Yeah, there, I said it. because I was terrified that I was going to continue to perpetuate that evil, terrible mother legacy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've questioned where, like, how early did that, not just through what I watched my mom do, but that feminist ideology that was actually passed through my dad and mom too, not
Yeah.
just by how
Well,
treated,
I think I'm the same generation as your mom and dad. So,
which is so interesting.
we were immersed in that.
Right.
Immersed in, the when I was in junior high, Gloria Steinem, blah blah. In fact, my mother got me eyeglasses that were just like hers, and I remember thinking, okay, and I actually won most liberated female in school for
Most liberated?
state. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, that's
a
just
cool title.
it's so ridiculous when I think about it, because it's like, no, dude, I had a boyfriend. I was all over him. I wanted to get married and the whole 9 yards. I mean, just weird, just totally, totally weird. But because I was a geek and I wore glasses and I was really great at athletics, and I actually spearheaded some volleyball match with the dudes. And I mean, I had some like fierce women on my team, who are probably men right now. I'm sure. I mean, I can say that because I think it's actually true. But we kicked their ass. But based on that,
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how early that, like, my whole idea that, oh, I'm never going to have kids, I've questioned, like, was that mind control or was that actually
it
me?
could very well be.
Yeah.
It could very well be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the end, I think it'll all work out, and be full and fulfilling. But yeah, there's definitely been moments of that for sure. One of the interesting things about my dad was that he was constantly messaging us, his messaging when he would talk to us was like, he didn't want us to grow up and be like our mom, because so he wanted us to be really independent and not ever have to depend on a man. Because if we made ourselves dependent, then we'd end up like our mom and getting abused and all this stuff. And I think about that now and I'm like, but if you had just not abused her,
oh my God, that is
and everything could have been like pretty good, like,
wow. So
that's kind of
he
weird.
have that level of consciousness about what the fuck he was up to?
Well, okay, so here's like, it wasn't all bad, and it never is, right? I mean, I don't think it ever is. There's certain things about my dad that I'm insanely grateful for. And it's probably the alchemy of like what I brought into this life anyway already, just the conscious level of consciousness I had, and I was ready for. But he definitely had a lot of consciousness in like how he raised us and sort of the ideas, at least with some of them, the ideas he put in our head and like how he molded us through our talks. And we did a lot of talking. A lot of that talking was gaslighting. But a lot of it was actually him teaching me how to be honest, how to always be truthful no matter what, how to face consequences, how to confront consequences head on. And so I've become this person who's like radically honest with myself. And I do attribute that to some degree.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was mixed in with all this twisted fear and humiliation, which I've had to, but that's those things where you can distill out some of the superpowers. I think.
Well, and that's great masculine mentoring, because men are much more straightforward. They're much more directed. They have a lot of hidden agendas, unless they've been feminized. Right.
Yeah. So I am grateful for that. But part of that messaging was like, don't grow up to be like your mom, because you'll end up with somebody like me who's going to abuse you, basically.
Wow. Great dad.
Like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
So let's talk about the specific kinds of shadow work that you utilized. in your journey thus far?
Oh, that's an interesting specific kinds.
Yeah.
I mean, at first, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that question, but let me just kind of like ramble through this a little bit.
Yeah.
At first it was just, peering into my own mind, like
Mhm.
just the ability, and the first ally that helped me do that actually was psychedelics at like age 16. I started taking LSD. And that was actually one of those calls, one of the themes in my whole story is like just these consistent calls that come from like right here.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you either follow them or you don't. And it's like the more you follow them, the deeper your journey's going to get, because that's where it's coming from. It's
no, psilocybin really worked that one. That was good.
Yeah. So the first time I started getting a glimpse into sort of my shadow, my subconscious mind, and like the underpinnings of my behaviors was on LSD trips, where it's kind of a bad trip, really, because you're like looking in like, oh fuck, like got some weird shit going on. I'm actually kind of insecure and like paranoid or whatever, whatever's going on over there. I don't remember a whole lot of specifics about, but I do remember being in groups and connecting something that I was previously unaware of with certain behaviors or certain ways that I would avoid things. So that all started like kind of up here.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you're just kind of looking at your thoughts, your beliefs, things that bubble up. Just that sort of almost pre-audible subconscious level where it can kind of slip by even now. That self-talk that's just like right under the surface. And right after my like major awakening, that's really what kind of collapsed for me, was my whole mental structure that was my personhood, all built on a core falsehood, right? It was built on this like, worthiness. So I was actually able to go in and look at that like psychically, internally, and see it as like a cage. I mean, you call them cages sometimes, these trauma cages. Yeah. That's kind of what it looks like. They're these complexes of beliefs that are all connected.
Right.
So I could, all of a sudden after my major awakening, I could see that in my own mind. But it was very mental. It was also emotional. Yeah. But it was very much like I could see the mental contents of it.
Well, so and the mental contents is what gets pushed out onto reality. Right.
It's kind of that last step before you're actually going to turn that into a behavior. And
Wow.
Or project it, reflect it back through the outer experience. Yeah. So that's kind of how it started. I'm trying to think of like specific, tools like changing core beliefs, or, I mean, I pretty much just went in there. Oh, there's a negative core belief. I'm going to change that. And then maybe affirmations and just reminding myself. And
cool. Yeah. The positive self-talk is really, really, really important,
Right. And then through that, it just kind of over the years, it's just continued to deepen and get deeper and deeper. So it's like then getting into the emotional underpinnings of the thoughts. So then I got into this practice of just diving in through negative emotions and just allowing myself to fully feel them, like allow that to fully move through. And it's usually mostly right here where that's kind of occurring. Once you get more into that somatic awareness, it's other places too. But in the beginning, I found when I was just facing negative emotion and allowing that energy to move, it was just sort of this heart experience, right? And then what happens is, like, if you can fully surrender through any feeling, even if it's negative, especially if it's negative, probably, it allows you to eventually, once you clear out enough, you kind of merge the inner and the outer. Yeah. There's a unity consciousness that occurs. You've been there. Have you been?
Yeah, I have. I have.
Yeah. So I kind of went into that for a while, and then once I started doing, massage and deepen my yoga practice and everything, it slowly started getting more like directly somatic. So then it just became about tracking sensation in the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really not
So
even
important.
Yeah, there was a point where it's like, just put the story aside, track the sensation, dive in, get underneath, track that sensation, and then see where it goes.
Yeah.
And that can be almost scientific at times. It's like you can even kind of like get under the emotion.
Yeah, I mind map those things.
You do? Yeah. Yeah.
I do. It's so Capricorn. I mean, it really is.
Is it the mind
systemizing what I'm feeling in the body? And then, all the subcategories of it, it's like, good Lord, girlfriend. But what it does, though, is that, I got it on a piece of paper and I'm like,
Right.
Like, to be able to track it and how it plays out in the theater of the matrix.
Right.
It's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And once you see it, you're like, I am fucking not going there.
Right.
That is not a good place. That's no.
Yeah. So I noticed when I started getting more on that direct somatic level is when I started getting more into the pre-verbal, when I was a baby.
And that's a lot of our trauma-based mind control programming. That's that complex PTSD when we're pre-verbal and we don't have the language and there's not a communication, there's not a psychic connection with mama that she's going to like pick up because she's completely disconnected.
Right, totally. My mom was in a state of fear, like perpetual fear. Yeah. So my nervous system, your nervous system gets wired.
Yeah, and you absorb that in utero.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it starts. So I know that for myself, when I hear these women and these feminists talk about, how fucked up motherhood and they're imposing and it's the fucking patriarchy, I'm like going, excuse me, but we conceive them, we grow them in our uteruses, in our bodies, we birth them, and a lot of women threaten, if I don't want you up to birth, I can abort you. So there, I mean, that's horrifying to me. Yeah. And children are absorbing this. So if their mamas are in a shit show or they're fucking about or they're doing drugs or they're not taking care of themselves or they hate themselves or, they're fucking 3,000 dudes, I mean, you think about it, that fetus, that baby, that being is absorbing this shit. So ladies, I'm not blaming us. I'm not blaming you. I'm not. I want us to take responsibility about what the fuck that we're doing and realize the consequences and the power that we wield as bringers of life or the bringers of death. There we are.
Right.
Those
women have a ton of power, especially now.
Yeah.
I from what I'm seeing, they have a lot more power in, the
absolutely. And yet the cry for victimization and the identitarianism of all this shit, it's like, it makes me crazy. And for somebody like me, I've been around a long time. It's like, really? Are we here? I can't take it sometimes.
Right.
So then I need to call you up.
Yeah. I think it's that pendulum too. It's like, I think if we look back, even in your generation or the generation before you, I look at what my mom went through, and it does look like a lot of it's coming through the masculine or the men.
Well, it's designed for that. It's designed to give that appearance with the pushback. And so the pushback is the uber sexuality, the fuck you.
Right.
The sexual revolution. I mean, the birth control pill fucking was a game changer because now women can fuck whoever they want. And the whole thing with abortion rights. If I get knocked up, I'll just kill it. Why not? It's not
Yeah.
alive. It's not a being, you know, and the new agers going, well, the soul doesn't actually enter into the body until the first breath. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Stop. I really just want to go off.
Yeah, I know. I have gone off.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. And you know, I've had to answer for a lot of my very, very poor choices of the abortions, not taking care of myself because I was starving myself, you know, trying to be vegan. You know, it's like, oh God.
Right, right.
Yeah. So there are all these processes, all these little it seems infinitesimally small, but then when they play out in the theater and you realize, oh shit.
Right. Right.
What was I doing? What was I up to? Did I even have an awareness of what I was up to?
Right. Yeah, I have a good example of that. One of my, I call it trauma tracking, like to the causal point, but one of my instances of that, I actually, I was just noticing these patterns repeating in my relationships and noticing how I was kind of just the same things would come up and I would go through it and I, you know, I got dissatisfied with it, but I was just watching it over like a few years time. And every time I would kind of see it come up, I would just go inward and then track the feeling. And then I would almost go in psychically first and then track the feeling underneath, just like we're talking about, and then get into the somatic sensation. And I would just explore that. And then a few years down the road, after exploring that for a while, I went through a big breakup. And it was this big sort of explosion of whatever that was internally. So I chose to go in and track it. And it led me to its source point, which was actually at that moment, the source point was this trauma right after birth. So, I mean, honestly, it probably started in the womb, but I actually remembered like viscerally, it's like I went back there and I was just reliving the experience of being completely alone and feeling like I was gonna die. Because when you're a newborn baby, aloneness equals death pretty much. Like if you're crying and nobody's coming,
right.
And I could feel that. It was just a somatic experience, right? And I know you understand what I mean because we've talked about this. But I was able then to look at that behavior and start to unravel that really well because I kind of rooted out by reliving it and giving it that pure awareness and loving myself in that place. Then when those behaviors wanted to come up again, there just wasn't much power behind it. So it changed the outer screen, right?
Interesting.
Interesting. Who I attracted and over time. It wasn't like a right away thing, but so that's kind of cool. I just think that's so cool how we can actually look at this outer screen and how we're interacting with it. As you call it, the outer screen. And then follow that inward. And there's usually some source. If it's a repeated pattern, there's usually some kind of source point.
That's really cool because you're witnessing it from your awakened state where you're tracking it. You're seeing it on in all its iterations. You know, and it's funny because what you describe, I was working with someone the other day, and the majority of the work that seems to have been consistently coming up ever since I started my practice 37 years ago is prenatal trauma. And so what you described after birth, I'm wondering if that could possibly be connected to the disconnection of the umbilical cord from the rest of the placenta. Because I know I've got like maybe a half a dozen women friends over the years who've opted for what's called the lotus birth, where you birth your baby and you don't disconnect the placenta. You wait for the placenta to birth. And it stays attached until it naturally falls off on its own. And when it falls off and it dries, it's dried completely. It looks like a lotus blossom.
Oh,
Grew.
that's why they call it the lotus. Yeah, I
That's
didn't
why
know
they
that's
call
why
it
they call
lotus
it
birth. So because the thoughts behind that is that by leaving the placenta intact, the baby still gets nourished from what is remaining in the placenta. And when it
Right.
disconnects, there's a full immersion or a full transmission of the nurturants, the nutrients, and the connection to mama.
Right, right. All the blood that's in there goes into the
Right.
baby, and you need that iron
Yeah,
and everything
yeah,
else that's
yeah,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't have a birth anywhere close to that, and that's a huge subject too. Just like how we birth right
Yes.
now, like the mainstream birthing process is a nightmare.
It really, really, really is.
I mean, I can't even imagine when I was thinking, well, maybe I'm not too old to have a baby. Maybe I should have a baby. I was looking into that whole thing. I'm like, there's no way I can go into a hospital and do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I shouldn't say no way, because if it was an absolute emergency, yeah, but man, I just,
Yeah.
I would
And
want
we
to do that.
abdicate our power. Just give me the epidural. Just get it out of me. Get it out of, oh my God. I've been Lamaze partner. I've been a Lamaze partner several times over the whole of my life. And I just remember the last one, I was so disappointed in this friend of mine, really disappointed, because we had done all these like classes, and she had done all these classes and was taught, we had the doula, the midwife, the whole 9 yards. And when it came to brass tacks, I'm going to the fucking hospital. Everybody can fuck off.
Right.
End of story. And I was just like, she said, I don't need you.
You have to be really committed to I mean, thankfully, my mom actually did all her births natural.
Wow. Good
Yeah.
for her.
Yeah.
Way to go, Mom.
Yeah. That's cool, because it really wasn't common, and she was in the hospital. She didn't do the epidural or anything. So
wow.
yeah.
And that's impressive. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for her, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But that somatic intelligence, I'm finding, is so important. And just, one of the things I would like to help others with is building that interoception and that somatic awareness.
That's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so much can be healed from that place. Right.
Yeah.
And then just the mastering of the nervous system and being able to regulate your own nervous system, like on really basic levels.
Yes.
And a lot of that is just reminding yourself to orient, and things like that. But there's a lot of little tools and techniques.
Yeah.
Actually.
This is so good, because what you're fostering is that heart, mind, body, soul coordination.
Exactly.
And that alignment, it just takes care of everything eventually on its own. And it's very organic.
Right. It's very organic, very holistic. And you can kind of enter at any point, because like when I started my journey, I couldn't have gone directly into the somatic awareness, because I had to kind of come in from more the mind place. Yes. And I think a lot of people are like that, because at first you're in your head with everything.
Yeah.
So it's this slow kind of deepening process.
Yeah. Well, and that is a beautiful trickle down effect.
Right.
For lack of a better way to say it, because, when we're dealing with natural law and the Hermeticum, the universe is mind, all is mental.
Right.
So of course, it's all going to be in our heads, because we are actually creating a reality based on what's going on in our minds. And most people don't even understand that.
Right.
And so quite often the process in shadow work and going through the dark night of the soul, so to speak, being in trauma is like, I'm losing my fucking mind. Well, yes, you do. You have to expel all these erroneous beliefs and these thoughts, and learn how to think properly, understanding the Hermeticum, that first principle of mentalism, where, you're in charge. You have to learn how to think properly. Otherwise, your traumas are going to be controlling you. And if it's not your traumas, it's going to be the outer screen of the theater of the world that's going to hijack your focus and hijack your ability to control the information that comes to you.
Right.
So you don't have to say I am to any of that information. You can actually pick and choose what you're saying I am to.
Right. Right. Yeah, a lot of people are, I think, disconnected from that internal fuel source that then fuels the thoughts and the images or whatever. And instead we sort of plug into the external source, you know, or you could say the difference between your source and like the programming, the matrix.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's the language that we use a lot. But
and most people want to, you know, just give away. They want to give away their power to the matrix and to the shit shows and to the groups.
It's pretty seductive, I have to say. Like, even I get into this scrolling mode. I go through waves, you know, and I'll just be like, I am fucking stuck in scrolling mode right now, and this is terrible. Like, this is bad.
I know. It's like, shit, what have I been doing? And you realize, like, I caught myself the other day. I was scrolling for 10 minutes and I had no idea.
It's a time warp.
Fucking clue.
It's a total time warp, and there's no real satisfaction at the end of that.
Of course not. No. There's no satisfaction. I feel exhausted, you know.
Right.
I feel exhausted. I mean, it's just like, it's like an energy suck. Oh my God, we've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes already.
Oh, that's great. That went by fast. I thought I was going to be all nervous, but you look like
no, girl,
you're to talk to you.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess we can wrap it up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, what's your to these days? Where can people find you?
Oh, do you want me to, can you just post links down below or whatever?
Yeah,
and I'll send
totally.
Yeah, because I have like my website and obviously my Facebook and then a couple other links.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Any parting words of wisdom for my girl?
What's that?
Any parting words of wisdom for my girl?
Parting words of wisdom. Let's see. Don't be afraid to fully embody your experience, all of it, from the trauma to everything that comes out of it, and find your inner source and resource through that, because we all have that, and allow that to guide you. That's my wisdom. That's my, what's today?
I forget.
That's my Wednesday wisdom.
Yay. Okay. Mittwoch wisdom.
But awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, honey. That was fantastic. And as you know, I don't edit for shit. So
no,
you know,
it definitely touched on a little some ground here and there. I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go there, but whatever.
But you know, it's all good. It's all good. I think I always set the intention for things to be kismet and to just flow, or they're gonna organically flow, because you know me, I don't like pretense. I really
and you know what I don't like is like just reading something or rehearsing something. That's what I got caught in for a minute, is rehearsing something so much that by the time you're saying it, it's not real.
It doesn't flow.
It feels weird. Like the organic.
Yeah,
sure. I'm glad we did that.
All right, darlings.
Sending you love.
Sending you love. And so that's it, kids. That's it, kids. And so be kind to yourselves during these journeys that you undertake, doing shadow work and having that inspiration for more self-awareness and diving in to your body to incarnate that heart, mind, body, soul coordination. So that's it. And so until next time, here's to your love, truth, and beauty, my divine ones. Mwah! Bye for now.